Hello and welcome to another open source live code hangout. Today we'll be working on the Western Friend website. My current goal is to help improve the code quality by adding unit test coverage, which means I also need to break down some of the more complicated parts of the code. I have a really complicated function, several of them, in the shared pie. And it's essentially where I'm kind of parsing a bunch of data. I'm iterating over a big blob of HTML, splitting it, parsing it item by item, extracting particular types of items, images, pull quotes, parsing these, reassembling the body as a wagtail CMS block widget, sort of a stream field is like a bunch of, it's an array or list of these generic components called blocks. I've been puzzling over this for a while. I was like, something just seems off. Firstly, the first sign that this needs refactoring is the size of the function. I have this kind of accumulator here that I'm using to gather consecutive blocks until I hit a particular block that needs special treatment. So these are like paragraphs. I want to assemble a big rich text field with a bunch of paragraphs, but as soon as I hit an image or like a pull quote or some other special cases, I need to break out of that, save what I've got so far into a rich text element, handle the image, continue parsing the rest of it, sort of an iterative thing until we get to the end of the body and have reassembled this stream field, which is like an array of rich text, image, rich text, pull quote, blocks. Using GPT-4 to help us out and explore certain questions. In some ways it's comparable and even exceeds the experience of Stack Overflow. But in this case, I asked it a very specific question about my code base that I couldn't really turn to Stack Overflow for with good conscience. I can't ask people on Stack Overflow to refactor my code. I don't know. So I just said I have a really long function and it's hard to understand and test. I'm going to split up this functions into smaller parts so that I can add unit tests for all the code. And I just kind of pasted in this big parse body blocks function, just without even, any backticks or anything, just kind of pasted it in. And so it said the function you provided seems to be doing a few different things. Parsing HTML with beautiful soup, searching through the elements of the parsed HTML, and processing pull quotes, images, and rich text. Basically, yeah. We have special handlers for these. At least 3 different block types. Pull quote, image, and rich text are 3 wagtail blocks. Rich text is internal. Images and pull quotes I've kind of extended or built somehow a little bit more bespoke to this project. In order to split this function into smaller, more manageable parts and improve its testability, you can start by creating separate functions to handle each of these responsibilities. Here's an example of how you might do that. And it just split it out. Process HTML, process element, process pull quote, process image, parse body blocks. So yeah, it looks good. Now my parse body blocks is much more manageable. Really nice, easy to read, and then I can get to the layer of abstraction I need when it's appropriate. So I'll comment out this sort of monolithic function. Yeah, and I asked it this off stream, but I was like, this is so cool. I really want to show this on stream. Just as an example of how these large language models can be used, to make us more effective at our work. It still uses this accumulator, so I was kind of right in my intuition that I wasn't going to be able to get rid of that. But it does so in a more refined way, which is what I was just struggling to find the right solution here. So essentially, now anytime we copy and paste code from Stack Overflow or have code auto-generated us from any large language model or GitHub Copilot. I'm not sure if GitHub Copilot is a large language model. We should always, review it and make sure it's doing what we expect, and that we make sure we understand it. Pilot helping out there. Process pull quote also returns. Now, one thing that this is cool, it did is, I think it called it a dependency injection. This article body blocks is also an accumulator. It's a list of tuples, and essentially the wagtail internal stream field, as I mentioned, is like a list of these block elements. These are kind of like UI components in a way. There's some behavior, a template, some data all bundled in, and it gets rendered in, into the user interface. In this case, mostly server-side rendering, but you can bundle JavaScript and things client-side in the templates. It's not mutually exclusive. So it defines this at a top level in the parse body blocks function, as well as the accumulator, and then it injects this into the process element. So there's a reference now inside of this function that can mutate this top level array. I don't know why that didn't occur to me. I'm just maybe not so familiar with that pattern. I've encountered it mostly with state management in applications and user interface applications like Flutter, where you define your sort of state, or even some functions that modify state in a top level context and pass it into the children. That way they can mutate or invoke these functions, mutate that state or invoke the function, and it has an effect in the parent context that can then propagate to other children. And that's essentially the pattern here, and I believe it's called dependency injection, because you're injecting into those functions a dependency or something that you can then work with inside of that handler. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Which also illustrates that this large language model is working at a high level of abstraction. I don't know if you would call it understanding, but I think I'm also of the perspective of it doesn't so much matter if it understands. The effect is what we can kind of measure right now, is what we can observe, the output. So this is in a way AI behavioralism. I can see the behavior, but not necessarily see the internal perception or representation. This is the awkwardness I'm doing. Despite searching this multiple times, and the answer is probably obvious if I can discover it in hindsight, I suppose it'll be obvious. I just can't get this pipe character on my Finnish keyboard layout. Finnish keyboard layout. Not Swedish, not like Danish or some other pastry. I'm just kidding, but I can't find the pipe character. I've tried all these alt-ger commands. I've tried the alt-ger greater than less than key. Tried shift greater than less than. I don't know why I can't find this. It's a Mac. Try it one more time. Character. MacBook Finnish keyboard. It's sort of a MacBook, but not quite. Alt 7. Alt plus 7. That's not too bad if that's the case. Alt 7. Oh yes. It's the Shift 7 is the /. Alt 7 is the thing. Okay, wow. What else do I need here? Tilde. I use that a lot. Alt plus caret. Very cool. I need to print this and just hang it on the wall there. Thank you. Verdalikov. GPT-4 is a very useful refactoring tool, as well as helpful in many other ways. It's helped me explore concepts, draft new content like blog articles, and come up with new ideas, some project ideas that I'd like to carry forward, but right now I just need to focus on one project and one project only. So despite these ideas, I'm putting them on hold. I'm practicing self-restraint, not just diving into the next project. I've already done that with this Western Friend project. I've tried to do side projects and the Western Friend project, and didn't even end up really doing anything. This Western Friend project is still ongoing after about 5 years of development. And we're trying to really buckle down, trying to make that release, make it happen this year. So it just takes a bit of focus and discipline, which I still struggle with. And we'll just go ahead and put trailing commas for good measure. This is example. You still have to work with the code and understand it. Just to reiterate that part, it's essential that this GPT-4 and these large language models are really useful to accelerate our work, get us a big leap forward. But usually I'm using them in a loop, like cycling back over, asking follow-up questions, or posing refinements to the output. Here I'm manually refining the output. So they're just, I think so far, just aids to help us be more effective. Usually I'm using them in a loop, like cycling back over, asking follow-up questions, or posing refinements to the output. Here I'm manually refining the output. They're just, I think so far, just aids to help us be more effective. Cautiously optimistic. So this one would be the same. I need to pass the item there. I don't need to stringify it, since I was essentially doing that internally. And this is a lot to juggle in your head, like where I'm using this as a string versus where I'm using it as a BS4 tag. So that's why it's essential that we introduce typing to our code base. It's literally what I was saying in the comment here, so these are all aligning here. So and again, the juggling, the mental gymnastics you have to go through to keep all these concepts in the air and not drop any of them is quite a lot, and I don't have very much bandwidth in my brain, so I need help from the tooling as much as I can, as much as I can get. All right, let's try it out again. Mandel. Yeah, you could say that. It sort of comes, I think I've inherited it a bit. My biological mom was what you would call a tumbleweed. She never really settled in her life. I think she moved, I don't know how many times. Wasn't raised by her, but I think she only lived in places like 1 or 2 years, and would move, moving in apartments in the same city or moving to a whole other cities. She lived in Florida, she lived in Arizona, she lived in Kansas and Missouri, and I don't know where else. Then my grandma, who adopted me, we moved a few times growing up, but mainly between Kansas and Florida. Then I lived in Kansas for a while. Then I ended up in California, and now I've hop-skipped over to Finland. In a nutshell, I've also lived briefly for a little bit in Missouri. But I've been here in Finland for 9 years, so that's a testament. I've actually been in the same city in Finland for 9 years, so yeah. I think at this stage of my life, I'm ready to kind of hopefully put roots. That's what I'm trying to do. It's a bit challenging, isn't it? Yeah, here's the current rankings. GPT-4 has got 1225 by OpenAPI. Claude V1, 1195 by Anthropic. And the Anthropic, I think, I don't know how much about these organizations, but Anthropic does have some guiding principles on LLM safety, and including safety in the development and deployment of these large language models. Anthropic, which I think is a really important theme, and it should be essential in our research in general. safety, right? Ethics and safety are major, should be major constraints in our pursuit of knowledge. Yeah, so they put safety at the frontier. So I'm kind of on board with this company. I don't know much about them, so it's not much of an endorsement, but they have their own LLM. I haven't tried it out. I did do the OpenAI. One thing that kind of bothers me about OpenAI is they have open in their name, but a lot of what they do is not open source or necessarily published openly. So it's kind of a misappropriation of that ethos of openness. But at the same time, they are publishing research and things like that, and they're at the forefront of the ethics discussions in this space, including their CEO, what is his name, Sam Altman, testifying in Congress and things like that, and urging to standardize and regulate these models and the sort of research process that brings these models into the market and into the world and into our lives. So yeah, the top two of the top three are Anthropic, but then we got the GPT 3.5s not far behind. And then there's Llama that came out of Facebook, as far as I understand. Palm 2, this is coming from Google. Yeah, Google. So they're in the contenders, the top contenders here. Anyway, it's cool to see how they shape up and compare. And GPT-4 is pretty effective. So I would imagine this Claude is also fairly effective. I think it's just on a wait list right now. Yeah, but they have a Slack bot. Yeah, nonetheless, it's worth checking out. So I'm certainly interested in pragmatic uses of these tools. I'm using them on a daily basis, both in my day job and on my open source work. I am concerned that we develop technology in general to support human life and to affirm human rights. We do things safely. I'm not in the camp that says, well, if we don't do militarized artificial intelligence, some other country will do it. I think that's just a cop-out. We need ethics and international standards and agreements to develop technology safely.